Welcome back to Official Sigma Male, the channel where we explore the depths of masculine power and potential that society rarely discusses. Today, we're diving into a truth that many men feel, but few understand. The necessity of embracing your inner monster to truly embody the Sigma mindset. You've probably noticed that the most successful Sigma men throughout history have something in common. They all possess a certain edge, a controlled ferocity that both intimidates and commands. Respect. This isn't accidental. What we'll reveal today is how this monstrous quality isn't something to suppress, but rather a powerful force to harness strategically. Before we begin this journey of transformation, ask yourself, are you ready to face the parts of yourself that society has labeled as dangerous? Are you prepared to integrate your shadow rather than deny it? If you're seeking to understand the core of Sigma power that separates the truly exceptional from the merely average men, make sure you subscribe to Official Sigma Male now. By the end of this video, you'll understand why embracing your darkness might be the most important step in your journey to true freedom and power. Strategic solitude. The journey begins with strategic solitude, not isolation born from fear, but a calculated separation that allows the Sigma male to observe, analyze, and strategize from the periphery. Unlike the alpha, who stands at the center of social circles, the Sigma maintains distance not because he can't integrate, but because he chooses the vantage point that grants superior perspective. This intentional distance serves multiple purposes. First, it allows you to avoid unnecessary social entanglements that drain your energy and focus. The average man spends countless hours navigating pointless social obligations and pleasing others, while the Sigma preserves his vital energy for pursuits that truly matter. Second, solitude creates the mental space necessary for deep thinking and self-reflection. In today's hyper-connected world, constant social interaction creates a fog of external opinions that clouds judgment. Strategic solitude clears this fog, allowing you to hear your own thoughts and develop convictions based on personal observation rather than social consensus. Consider the example of Nikola Tesla, a quintessential Sigma who once said, "Be alone. That is the secret of invention. Be alone. That is when ideas are born." His strategic withdrawal from conventional social frameworks allowed him to develop revolutionary perspectives that changed the world. The monstrous aspect of strategic solitude lies in your willingness to be misunderstood. Society fears what it cannot categorize, and a man who chooses solitude triggers suspicion. Embrace this. The discomfort others feel when they cannot place you within their social framework is not your burden to bear. It's your competitive advantage. To implement strategic solitude effectively, begin by auditing your social calendar. Eliminate engagements that serve no purpose beyond meeting expectations. Create designated periods of complete solitude, not just physical isolation, while scrolling through social media, but true mental solitude, free from external influences. Start with 2 hours weekly and gradually increase. Remember that strategic solitude isn't about becoming a hermit. It's about engaging with society on your terms, when it serves your purpose, rather than being perpetually available at society's beck and call. This selective engagement is what makes others perceive something monstrous in your nature, your immunity to their social control mechanisms. The true power of strategic solitude emerges when you no longer fear being alone with your thoughts. When you can sit in silence without reaching for distraction, you've mastered the first component of the Sigma mindset, creating the foundation upon which all other aspects of your power will be built. The beast within. Every man carries within him a primordial force, a beast that society has taught him to chain, sedate, and deny. This force isn't the emotional volatility that weaker men display when provoked. Rather, it's the concentrated power of masculine energy in its rawest form, focused, dangerous, and capable of tremendous impact when directed with precision. The modern world has waged war against this aspect of masculinity. From childhood, boys are taught that their natural aggressive instincts, competitive drive, and territorial nature are problematic rather than essential. The result? Generations of men disconnected from their power source, wondering why they feel perpetually drained and incapable of achieving their potential. The Sigma male fundamentally rejects this emasculation. He recognizes that his inner beast isn't something to be cured through therapy or medication. It's his greatest asset when properly harnessed. Consider historical figures like Alexander the Great, whose contemporaries described a terrible gleam in his eye before battle. This wasn't mental illness. It was the visible manifestation of primal power channeled toward conquest. Accessing this beast requires dismantling years of conditioning. Begin by identifying moments when you've suppressed your natural responses to protect others' comfort. That surge of anger when someone disrespects you, the impulse to dominate in competitive situations, the desire to pursue what you want without apology. These aren't defects. They're your instincts attempting to break through artificial restraints. Contrary to popular belief, embracing your beast doesn't mean becoming uncontrolled. Quite the opposite. Men who deny their natural aggression often explode in destructive outbursts because they have no practice channeling this energy. The Sigma male who acknowledges his beast learns to direct this force with surgical precision, using it to fuel discipline, drive, and determination. This integration process requires facing uncomfortable truths. You must acknowledge that part of you enjoys domination, desires conquest, and finds satisfaction in victory. These aren't shameful secrets, but evolutionary advantages that have ensured human survival for millennia. The truly dangerous man isn't the one who recognizes his capacity for destruction. It's the one who denies this capacity exists while it operates unconsciously. Practical integration begins with physical expression. Combat sports, weightlifting, and intense physical challenges provide legitimate outlets for primal energy. These aren't just exercises, they're rituals that reconnect you with your nature. Watch how your presence changes after months of such practice. Others will sense the contained power without you saying a word. Remember, society fears what it cannot control. When you begin manifesting your authentic masculine energy, expect resistance. You'll be labeled dangerous, toxic, or unstable by those who benefit from your domestication. The Sigma male understands this reaction for what it is, confirmation that he's reclaiming what was rightfully his from the beginning, controlled chaos. The third dimension of the Sigma male's monstrous power lies in his relationship with chaos. While the average man seeks stability at all costs, often sacrificing growth and opportunity for predictability, the Sigma understands that controlled chaos is the environment where extraordinary achievement becomes possible. This doesn't mean creating unnecessary disorder or living recklessly. Instead, it means developing a unique relationship with uncertainty and volatility, seeing these conditions not as threats, but as dynamic fields of possibility where conventional men fear to operate. Consider the most significant breakthroughs in human history. They rarely emerge from comfortable, structured environments. They're born in the crucible of disruption, where old patterns break down and new configurations become possible. The Sigma male instinctively positions himself at these edges, recognizing that the greatest opportunities exist where others see only danger. Developing comfort with chaos begins by deliberately destabilizing aspects of your life in controlled ways. Perhaps it's changing your routine unexpectedly, placing yourself in unfamiliar social environments, or taking calculated professional risks. Each exposure builds your capacity to think clearly amidst uncertainty, a rare and valuable skill. The monstrous quality emerges in how differently you respond to chaotic situations compared to others. While they panic, you analyze. While they retreat, you advance. While they seek immediate stability, you look for the hidden advantage. This calm capability in conditions of disorder creates an almost supernatural impression. People can't understand how you remain functional when systems break down. Strategic application of controlled chaos gives you tremendous leverage. In negotiations, business, and even relationships, the person most comfortable with uncertainty holds the power. When others desperately seek resolution, you maintain the patience to wait for optimal conditions, creating an asymmetric advantage. Look at figures like Elon Musk, who repeatedly creates controlled chaos within his organizations. While critics see disorder, those who understand recognize a deliberate strategy, using disruption to eliminate complacency, identify the truly committed, and accelerate innovation beyond conventional timelines. To implement this principle, start identifying areas of your life where your craving for stability has limited your growth. Deliberately introduce controlled variables of uncertainty. Then practice maintaining cognitive clarity despite emotional discomfort. Over time, you'll develop the capacity to function at levels of complexity and chaos that render others ineffective. Remember that controlled chaos isn't about destroying structure entirely. It's about maintaining the minimum necessary structure while eliminating the excessive rigidity that prevents dynamic response. Like a martial artist who remains balanced while in motion, the Sigma male creates just enough stability to operate effectively while remaining fluid enough to adapt instantly to changing conditions. Emotional fortress. The fourth dimension of the Sigma male's monstrous nature lies in his emotional architecture. Specifically, his construction of an impenetrable emotional fortress that protects his internal world while allowing precise, controlled engagement with external reality. This isn't emotional suppression, as commonly misunderstood. The difference is crucial. Suppression attempts to deny emotions, creating internal pressure that eventually ruptures. The emotional fortress, by contrast, acknowledges all emotions, but processes them privately, revealing only what serves a strategic purpose. The average man exists in one of two dysfunctional states, either completely transparent, where every emotion shows immediately on his face and in his behavior, or completely repressed, where he's disconnected from his own emotional signals. The Sigma male transcends both extremes, developing emotional sovereignty, full awareness combined with complete control over expression. Building this fortress begins with emotional literacy, developing the vocabulary and awareness to precisely identify your emotional states rather than experiencing them as vague, positive or negative feelings. This granularity of understanding transforms emotions from overwhelming forces to specific data points that inform rather than dictate your responses. The monstrous quality emerges in how this emotional mastery appears to others. They sense something unusual in your composure during crisis, your thoughtful response to provocations, and your selective vulnerability. This controlled emotional engagement creates an impression of depth and power. They recognize you're experiencing emotions, but choosing your response, rather than being driven by reactive patterns. Consider historical figures like Winston Churchill, who maintained strategic optimism during Britain's darkest hours, not because he didn't feel fear, but because he processed it privately while projecting exactly what his nation needed. This isn't deception, but rather emotional leadership, understanding that your expression affects others and taking responsibility for that impact. Practical development of the emotional fortress requires regular solitary reflection. Create a daily practice of emotional inventory, identifying, naming, and processing your emotional states without external validation or expression. This internal processing builds the habit of emotional self-sufficiency, reducing your need for others to witness or validate your emotional experience. The strategic advantage of the emotional fortress becomes most apparent during conflict and negotiation. When others become reactive, you maintain access to your full cognitive capacity. While they make concessions to release emotional pressure, you maintain your position until optimal resolution. This asymmetry in emotional handling creates significant leverage in virtually any human interaction. Remember that the emotional fortress isn't about becoming cold or unfeeling. Instead, it's about developing such profound emotional security that you choose connection rather than needing it, engaging emotionally from a position of strength rather than dependency. This selective emotional engagement, completely under your control, is what creates the mysterious quality that others find simultaneously intimidating and magnetic: the silent dominance. The fifth dimension of the Sigma male's monstrous power manifests as silent dominance, the ability to command respect and influence without relying on obvious displays of authority or verbal assertions of status. This stands in stark contrast to both the alpha's overt dominance displays and the beta's submissive positioning. Silent dominance operates on a principle that ancient strategists understood well. True power doesn't announce itself. The man who must constantly remind others of his importance reveals his insecurity rather than his strength. The Sigma's presence speaks for itself, creating a gravitational force that others respond to without conscious awareness. This quality develops through the cultivation of self-contained certainty, an unshakable internal conviction that doesn't require external validation. When you no longer need others to acknowledge your value, you stop engaging in the subtle, supplicating behaviors that most men unconsciously display in social situations. Observe the micro-behaviors that signal lower status: excessive nodding, nervous laughter, rushing speech, over-explaining, and constant seeking of approval through eye contact. The Sigma systematically eliminates these tells, replacing them with measured movement, strategic silence, and deliberate pacing that communicates absolute comfort in his own frame of reality. The monstrous aspect emerges in how this self-contained presence disrupts social hierarchies. Humans are biologically programmed to establish and maintain status relationships, typically through constant, subtle exchanges of dominance and submission signals. When someone neither dominates aggressively nor submits compliantly, but instead exists outside this exchange entirely, it creates an unsettling effect that others struggle to categorize. Silent dominance becomes particularly powerful in professional environments. Notice how the most competent person in meetings rarely speaks first, or most frequently. They wait, observe, and then deliver precisely calibrated input that shifts the entire discussion. This economy of engagement, the strategic deployment of your attention and contribution, multiplies your impact while preserving your energy. To develop this quality, begin implementing the practice of strategic silence. In conversations, deliberately extend your comfort with pauses. When asked a question, take a moment before responding. When others are speaking, resist the urge to fill every gap. This simple practice immediately distinguishes you from the majority who speak reactively rather than intentionally. Consider figures like Keanu Reeves, whose quiet confidence and minimal self-promotion have created an almost mythic status in an industry built on extravagant ego displays. His power comes not from demanding attention, but from being so internally complete that he doesn't need the validation that others desperately seek. Remember that silent dominance isn't about being silent in all situations. It's about ensuring that when you do speak or act, it carries the full weight of deliberate intention rather than reactive impulse. This selective deployment of your energy creates the impression of contained power. Others sense that what they're seeing is merely the visible surface of a much deeper capacity. Breaking social chains. The sixth dimension of the Sigma males. Monstrous nature involves systematically identifying and breaking the invisible social chains that constrain most men throughout their lives. These chains aren't physical restraints, but psychological programming installed through years of socialization. The unwritten rules, expectations, and assumptions that limit authentic masculine expression. Unlike the rebel who reacts against social norms while remaining defined by them, the Sigma conducts a methodical inventory of his conditioned responses, examining each for its origin and utility. This isn't adolescent rejection of all structure, but rather a strategic evaluation of which social constructs serve his development and which merely maintain his compliance. Begin by examining the fundamental social contracts you've unconsciously accepted. The obligation to pursue traditional success markers, the requirement to maintain others' comfort at your expense, the expectation of constant availability, the pressure to conform to group consensus, and the demand to justify your choices to those with no stake in your outcomes. The monstrous quality emerges when you start selectively disregarding these unwritten rules. Society expects predictable behavior based on shared agreements. When you calmly step outside these boundaries without apology or explanation, it creates a disorienting effect. Others sense a dangerous freedom in your conduct that simultaneously attracts and disturbs them. Consider practical applications. When someone attempts to shame you for an unconventional choice, neither defend yourself nor attack them. Simply acknowledge their perspective and continue without adjustment. When social pressure mounts to participate in activities that don't serve your purpose, decline without elaborate justification. When others demand your time or energy, evaluate the request based on your priorities rather than their expectations. This selective non-compliance extends to even subtle social dynamics. Notice how most conversations follow predictable patterns of exchange. Questions expecting certain answers, opinions requiring conventional responses, compliments demanding reciprocation. The Sigma male interrupts these automatic scripts, responding based on authentic assessment rather than social programming. The strategic advantage of breaking these chains becomes most apparent in life direction, while others remain confined to paths deemed acceptable by their social circles. You gain access to opportunities they cannot even perceive. This expanded field of possibility is the direct result of removing artificial constraints that limit potential while offering no genuine benefit. Examples abound of Sigma figures who achieved extraordinary outcomes specifically because they broke constraining social chains. Steve Jobs' infamous reality distortion field was simply his refusal to accept conventional limitations. His insistence that the impossible was achievable created the conditions where innovation could occur beyond established boundaries. Remember that breaking social chains isn't about rejecting all social norms. It's about conscious selection rather than automatic compliance. Some social structures serve valuable purposes, providing efficiency and mutual benefit. The key distinction is whether you're choosing to operate within a framework because it serves your purpose or because you fear the consequences of deviation. Self-mastery through isolation. The seventh dimension of the Sigma male's monstrous power is developed through strategic periods of complete isolation. Not mere physical solitude, but comprehensive detachment from external validation systems that most men remain perpetually tethered to. Unlike temporary withdrawals that serve as mere recovery periods, these deeper isolations function as transformative crucibles where genuine self-mastery becomes possible. In the absence of external reference points, you're forced to develop internal standards, motivations, and evaluations that exist independent of social consensus. This practice stands in direct opposition to contemporary hyperconnectivity. The average modern man never experiences true isolation, constantly surrounded by media voices, social feedback, and cultural programming that shapes his perception of reality. Even in physical solitude, his digital connections maintain the umbilical attachment to external validation systems. The Sigma male systematically disrupts this dependency through deliberate isolation practices. These might include extended wilderness experiences, meditation retreats, or self-designed challenges that remove access to familiar support structures. The specific form matters less than the fundamental condition, creating circumstances where you must confront yourself without distraction or assistance. The monstrous quality emerges during reintegration. After significant isolation experiences, you return to social contexts fundamentally changed, operating from internal reference points rather than seeking continuous external calibration. This self-contained quality creates an unsettling impression, as others unconsciously sense your independence from the approval mechanisms they remain bound by. Consider historical examples like Friedrich Nietzsche, who wrote, "He who cannot spend time alone with himself in a room is in danger." His extended periods of isolation produced philosophical insights that transcended conventional morality precisely because he developed the capacity to think beyond social constraints. Practical implementation begins with calibrated withdrawal. Start with short periods completely disconnected from digital devices, social contact, and media inputs. As your tolerance develops, extend these periods, paying careful attention to the withdrawal symptoms that emerge. Anxiety, boredom, and craving for validation reveal your specific dependencies. The strategic advantage becomes apparent in decision-making. When others remain paralyzed by concerns about perception and approval, you operate from clear internal directives. This decisiveness creates momentum that compounds over time, accelerating your progress while others remain stuck in cyclical deliberation. Remember that isolation as a development practice differs fundamentally from isolation as avoidance. The former is strategic and time-bound, serving specific growth objectives before re-engagement. The latter represents retreat from challenges and responsibilities. The distinction lies in your intention and subsequent application of what the isolation reveals. The ultimate test of whether this practice is developing power rather than avoidance is simple. Does your isolation increase your capacity for effective engagement upon return? True self-mastery through isolation doesn't diminish your ability to function socially. It enhances it by removing the neediness and reactivity that characterize most social interactions. The power of shadow integration. The eighth dimension of the Sigma male's monstrous power involves the deliberate integration of his psychological shadow, those aspects of the self that most men spend their lives denying, repressing, or projecting onto others. This Jungian concept represents perhaps the most profound source of untapped masculine power, yet remains the most neglected. Unlike conventional personal development that focuses exclusively on cultivating positive qualities, shadow integration requires unflinching confrontation with the darker aspects of your nature. Aggression, dominance, selfishness, competitiveness, and sexual assertiveness. These aren't flaws to be eliminated, but primal energies to be acknowledged and harnessed. The average man remains fragmented by his denial, creating an exhausting internal conflict between the person he pretends to be and the impulses he cannot acknowledge. This split consciousness drains vital energy and creates behavioral inconsistencies that undermine his effectiveness and authenticity. The Sigma male recognizes that true power comes not from perfecting an idealized self-image, but from achieving psychological wholeness, incorporating all aspects of his nature into a coherent, integrated identity where nothing remains disowned or unconscious. This integration process requires confronting what psychologist Robert Moore called the shadow king, warrior, magician, and lover, the distorted expressions of essential masculine archetypes. The monstrous quality emerges as this integration progresses. Others sense an unusual wholeness in your presence, a man who doesn't need to performatively demonstrate his virtue because he's already confronted his capacity for vice. This psychological completion creates an uncanny effect, as most people navigate life through carefully maintained compartmentalization. Consider historical figures like Theodore Roosevelt, who openly acknowledged his savage side while channeling it into productive pursuits. His comfort with his complete nature, both civilized and primal, created the authentic power that defined his leadership. Nothing about him was hidden, even from himself. Practical shadow integration begins with honest inventory. Identify the qualities you most strongly criticize in others. These typically represent disowned aspects of yourself projected outward. Examine your recurring dreams, emotional triggers, and relationship patterns for clues about what remains unintegrated. The strategic advantage of shadow integration becomes most evident in authenticity and presence. When nothing within you remains denied, your energy flows without internal obstruction. This unified force creates magnetic attraction, as others unconsciously recognize and respond to your psychological congruence in a world of fragmented personalities. Remember that integrating your shadow doesn't mean acting on every impulse or indulging destructive tendencies. Integration means consciousness, bringing these aspects into awareness where they can be directed rather than leaving them to operate autonomously in the unconscious. The integrated man doesn't suppress his aggression. He channels it into protection, achievement, and necessary confrontation. The ultimate expression of shadow integration manifests in moral authority. The man who has faced his own darkness speaks about human nature with earned insight rather than ideological certainty. This grounded wisdom, free from both naive optimism and cynical pessimism, represents the true voice of the integrated, masculine, simultaneously compassionate and uncompromising because it emerges from complete self-knowledge. Becoming legendary. The final dimension of the Sigma male's monstrous power culminates in becoming legendary, transcending ordinary, masculine achievement to create a lasting impact that extends beyond your immediate sphere and temporal existence. This isn't fame in the conventional sense, but rather the attainment of archetypal significance through deliberate mythic embodiment. Unlike celebrity, which requires constant external validation and typically diminishes over time, legendary status emerges from actions and qualities so aligned with fundamental human values that they resonate across cultural and generational boundaries. The Sigma understands that legendary status isn't conferred by media or masses, but earned through living with mythic intentionality. This process begins with archetypal awareness, recognizing which primal human patterns you're naturally aligned with and deliberately amplifying these qualities through conscious cultivation. Perhaps you embody aspects of the sage, the explorer, the creator, the warrior, or the sovereign. These aren't roles you play, but expressions of your authentic nature magnified to their highest potential. The monstrous quality emerges in the intensity of your commitment to this embodiment. While others live cautiously within the bounds of what seems reasonable, you pursue your chosen path with such singular focus that it appears almost inhuman to conventional observers. This all-consuming dedication creates both admiration and unease. Others recognize the beauty of complete commitment while sensing their own compromises by comparison. Consider figures like Muhammad Ali, who transcended being merely a boxer to become a living embodiment of unapologetic self-belief and principled defiance. His famous declaration, "I am the greatest," wasn't mere bravado, but rather the verbal manifestation of his complete identification with greatness itself. He didn't claim greatness, he became it through total commitment to its expression. Practical. Development of legendary status requires first identifying your core myth, the fundamental story that captures your highest potential. This isn't fantasy, but rather a narrative framework that organizes your choices, challenges, and contributions into a coherent whole with transcendent significance. The strategic implementation involves what Joseph Campbell called following your bliss, pursuing your deepest callings with such devotion that you transcend ordinary limitations. This isn't hedonism, but rather commitment to your unique expression so complete that it transforms obstacles into necessary elements of your heroic journey. The advantage of living with legendary intention extends beyond personal satisfaction to create ripple effects that influence others long after your direct interaction ends. When you embody archetypal qualities with authentic power, you activate corresponding potentials in those you encounter, becoming a catalyst for their development, even without conscious teaching. Remember that becoming legendary doesn't require universal recognition or historical significance. The true measure exists in the depth of your embodiment and the authenticity of your expression, rather than the breadth of your influence. A man can achieve legendary status within his family, community, or field without widespread acknowledgement. If his impact carries archetypal weight, the ultimate test of legendary status lies not in accumulation, wealth, achievements, or acclaim, but in integration. Have you fully become what you were uniquely designed to be? Have you expressed your singular combination of qualities at their highest potential? Have you transformed your limitations and wounds into sources of distinctive power? When the answer is yes, you've achieved what the ancient Greeks called arete, excellence not as comparison to others, but as the complete fulfillment of your intrinsic nature. As we've explored throughout this video, embracing your inner monster isn't about becoming destructive or harmful. It's about reclaiming the primal power that modern society has attempted to domesticate out of men. The Sigma path requires integrating rather than suppressing these aspects of yourself, channeling them with precision rather than unleashing them without purpose. Remember that what makes the Sigma truly formidable is not just the possession of this inner beast, but the masterful control exercised over it. You become the monster by choice, not by loss of control. This distinction separates the true Sigma from those who merely rebel against social norms without purpose or direction. If this exploration of Sigma psychology has resonated with you, don't miss our upcoming videos, where we'll dive deeper into specific strategies for developing each aspect of the Sigma mindset. Subscribe to Official Sigma Mail now and activate notifications, not just to consume content, but to join a community of men dedicated to authentic self-development beyond the constraints of conventional masculinity. The world doesn't need more men who pretend to be harmless. It needs men who have faced their inner darkness, mastered it, and can now use that power with wisdom and precision. The question isn't whether you have a monster within you. The question is whether you'll have the courage to acknowledge it and the discipline to harness it. The choice, as always for the Sigma male, remains entirely yours.